The smell hit me first: mildew, rust, and the particular sourness of a warehouse that hadn't seen daylight in years. My wrists were zip-tied behind my back, my knees aching against cold concrete, and 3 men in wife-beaters and prison tattoos were staring at me like I was a lottery ticket they'd already cashed. Memory arrived a half-second later, sharp and unwelcome, the way a stranger's hand might arrive on your shoulder in a dark alley. 12 hours ago, in the life that actually belonged to me, I had been Special Agent Andy Cole of the FBI's Tactical Field Division. 6 years in, top of my class at Quantico, the kind of agent handlers requested by name for the jobs nobody wanted to put in writing. My last memory was a stakeout gone sideways, and a bookstore paperback I'd been reading to kill time between shifts, something with a lurid cover and a title too long to be embarrassed about buying. Apparently I'd fallen asleep over a page I should have skipped, because I woke up inside it instead, in the body of a character who, absurdly, shared my exact name. I decided not to examine that coincidence too closely. Whatever cosmic clerk had filed me into this story clearly hadn't been paying attention, and I wasn't about to file a complaint. I was Andy Cole, a different Andy Cole, a soft, ornamental one who existed inside the pages of a book instead of a bureau case file, 24 years old. The soft, spineless, thoroughly ornamental fiancé of James Moretti, heir and reigning don of the Moretti crime family, Chicago's most quietly terrifying export since deep dish pizza. In the book this body belonged to, Andy Cole existed for exactly one purpose: to be kidnapped, to cry beautifully, and to die 2 chapters later so the real heroine could inherit his tragedy and his fiancé in one convenient afternoon. Correction. In this version, the heroine was a hero. Some other unlucky soul was about to get engaged to a mob boss and suffer accordingly. Lucky me, I got there first. Look who's awake, princess. The man in front tossed a grubby consent form onto the floor and flicked open a folding knife, pressing it to my throat. Sign it nice and quiet, and we let you live. I looked at the knife, then at his hand. I couldn't help myself. You're holding that backwards. 3 heads went still. Reverse grip like that, I continued, helpfully. You're not going to stab anybody clean. You'll slip and open your own palm to the bone. I've seen it happen. It's not pretty. The lead kidnapper's face went the color of raw liver. He raised his hand to backhand me. He never got the chance. The zip tie snapped like it had been waiting for permission. Whatever instinct lived under Andy Cole's soft skin surged up through my spine, cold and familiar as an old friend, and my body moved before my brain finished the thought: duck, pivot, heel strike clean into the man's temple. 3 minutes later, the warehouse door came off its hinges. James Moretti walked in, wearing a black wool coat and enough quiet menace to lower the room's temperature by 10 degrees, 40 men in dark suits fanning out behind him like a held breath. He stopped in the doorway, because his trembling, delicate fiancé was sitting cross-legged on the warehouse's one folding chair, calmly wiping his knuckles clean with the kidnapper's own shirt, while 3 grown men lay hog-tied and groaning at his feet. Nobody moved. Somewhere outside, a pigeon coughed. James Moretti, 29, boss of the Moretti family, inherited at 23 after burying his father before either of them wanted it. Cold enough that men called him the January dawn, the kind of cold that doesn't announce itself, just settles in your bones and stays. There was a particular quality to the silence that followed him into a room, the way conversations didn't so much stop as fold themselves away, the way even the air seemed to straighten its posture. It was the silence of men who had learned, expensively, that James Moretti rarely raised his voice, because he had never needed to. James's dark eyes swept over the scene once, slow, like he was recalculating everything he'd ever believed about the man in front of him. Behind him, his right hand, Nico, cleared his throat. Boss, I think we're a little late. Nico Reyes, 26. James's right hand and the family's unofficial translator between terrifying mob boss and human being, wears exhaustion like cologne. Oh hell, I'd forgotten my own character sheet. I dropped the shirt instantly, folded in on myself, hands flying to clutch my chest, and squeezed out 2 passable tears. J. James, I was so scared. The man on the floor, 3 ribs lighter, howled with laughter that turned into a wet cough. Scared? She? He broke 3 of my ribs and now he's scared? James's mouth curved, unimpressed. My eyes must be playing tricks. I could have sworn they tied themselves up. Tied themselves up so well they can't even stand, the man wheezed, and got no further sympathy from anyone in the room. James shrugged off his coat and draped it over my shoulders without asking. Home. I assumed he meant my family's house. He did not. The car pulled straight up to the wrought iron gates of the Moretti estate on the north shore, all lakeview windows and old money hedges, and I realized, with the sinking feeling of a man watching his exit door bricked over, that I lived here now. Can I say no? I asked. No. James closed his eyes and leaned his head back against the seat like a man saving his energy for a much longer war. Until I find who put a price on your head, you stay where I can see you. I'd rather not break in a new fiancé. Great, I thought. Survive the plot, dodge the bullet meant for the real love interest, quietly vanish before the story remembers I exist. Objective number 1, get this man to hate me enough to call off the wedding. The car ride was silent except for the wet hiss of tires on rain-slicked streets, streetlights sliding gold across James's profile in intervals, on, off, on, off. My knuckles had split open somewhere in the fight. I hadn't noticed until the sting caught up with the adrenaline, and I found myself staring at a thin line of blood welling along my first knuckle like it belonged to someone else. James noticed before I could hide it. Without a word, he reached into the console, produced a small first aid kit like he kept one in every vehicle he owned, which, I would later learn, he did, and took my hand in both of his. His hands were larger than mine, warm despite the cold he wore like armor, and surprisingly careful. He turned my palm to the weak dome light overhead, studying the split skin with the same unhurried attention he'd give a contract before signing it. When the antiseptic touched the cut, I hissed, and his grip tightened just slightly, not to hurt, but to steady. "You're allowed to flinch," he said quietly, not looking up. "I won't think less of you for it." I almost laughed, of all the things to say to a man who'd just watched me put 3 grown kidnappers on the ground. But something about the low, even way he said it, like he actually meant it, like it cost him something to offer, made the joke die in my throat instead. He wound the gauze around my knuckles with more patience than I expected from a man whose day job involved counting bodies, tied it off, and only then let go, like he was reluctant to. "Thank you," I said, and meant it more than I planned to. He glanced at me sideways, something unreadable moving behind his eyes before the cold settled back over his face like a curtain drawn shut. "Don't thank me. Just stay where I can see you." I turned to the window so he wouldn't see whatever my face was doing. Whatever this was, whatever had just passed between us in the dark, gauze-wrapped quiet of that car, it was not part of any plan I'd made, and it scared me more than the warehouse had. The Moretti estate, I quickly learned, was less a house than a small principality. 3 wings, a private dock on the lake, and a staff who moved through the halls with the practiced silence of people paid extremely well to see nothing. It should have been easy to make myself unwelcome in a place like that. It was not. My first sabotage attempt lasted exactly 1 evening. I demanded 8 meals a day, expecting to be labeled a bottomless, graceless disaster. James hired a second chef who specialized in regional Italian, doubled the kitchen budget, and asked with genuine concern whether I preferred my osso buco with saffron risotto or polenta. Plan 2, financial recklessness. I took his card downtown and bought the single most expensive handbag on Michigan Avenue. That night he glanced at the receipt, unbothered. "Only one? Are the coals that hard up these days?" The next morning, a black card with no listed limit appeared on my nightstand. Plan 3, deployed over afternoon tea with James's grandmother, involved deliberately butchering every piece of business terminology I could think of. Nana Rosa Moretti slapped her knee and cackled with delight. Rosa Moretti, 71, James's grandmother, the only person alive who still calls him Giulio, runs the family the way other grandmothers run a bake sale, with absolute cheerful authority. "Finally," she crowed, "a house full of scheming wolves. And my grandson brings home someone who doesn't know a hedge fund from a hedge." My Giulio's found himself a treasure. I sat there, internally combusting. That night I cornered James outside his study. "Maybe," I said with what I hoped was gravity, "we should call off the engagement." He didn't even look up from his paperwork. 3 seconds passed. "Reason? I don't feel like I deserve you." He turned a page. "Good to know. Try to keep up then." I stood there, mouth open, utterly defeated. This man was warm, patient, and shockingly hard to repel, and none of it was supposed to happen this way. My stepsister Chloe caught wind of the drama fast. She always did. Chloe Cole, 22. My father's daughter from his second marriage. Sweet as spun sugar in public, sharp as broken glass in private, has been trying to trade places with me since we were 14. She arrived at the estate armed with concern and an expensive teapot. "Let me pour for you, Andy," she said sweetly, and let the pot slip, sending scalding water arcing toward my face. The version of Andy written in the book would have flinched and taken it. My body did not consult that version. My hand snapped up, caught her wrist, turned it a precise 15 degrees, and the water sloshed back down over her own skirt instead. She shrieked. I let go instantly, pressing a hand to my chest like I'd frightened myself. Sorry, reflexes. I really don't like hot water. James walked in at that exact moment, took one look at my face and Chloe's ruined dress, and drew his own conclusions without asking a single question. "Get her out," he told the staff, voice flat as a closed door. "And don't let trash back in this house again." Chloe was escorted out mid-protest. I sat on the couch, quietly beginning to doubt everything I understood about villains and cruelty. The book said he was ruthless. Why does he keep protecting me instead? I decided to test the shape of him directly. James. If I did something truly unforgivable, what then? Depends what you mean by unforgivable. Say I hit someone. Badly. Depends if you won. I blinked. Say I ruined one of your deals. I'd make another. Say I lied to you. He set down his pen and looked straight at me for the first time all evening. Lied about money. Or lied about love. I choked on air. My ears went hot, and something in his expression eased, warmed, like he'd found a crack in a wall he'd been leaning against for years. He rose, braced one hand on the back of the couch, and leaned close enough that I could smell cedar and gun oil and something warmer underneath. "Andy," he murmured, low and amused, "you keep asking to end this. Is it me you're afraid of, or someone else you already want?" I sat frozen solid for the rest of the night. The next morning, a car blocked the estate's front gate before I'd even finished my coffee walk. A man in a white suit, gelled hair catching too much sunlight, stepped out with the theatrical grief of a soap opera lead. Derek Sloan, 26. Andy's college ex, charming, broke, and allergic to responsibility. Once helped himself to the real Andy's trust fund before conveniently disappearing. Andy. He reached for my hand like he had any right to it. "I know you've suffered under that man. Leave with me. I'll take care of you." I stepped back, dry as dust. "Take care of me with what money?" he faltered. "Our love. 3 questions," I said, holding up a hand. 1. Do you have as much money as James Moretti? Silence. 2. Can you fight as well as he can? His jaw tightened. 3, and this one matters most, are you as handsome as he is? Derek's mouth opened and closed with nothing behind it. No looks, no money? No muscle, I said, ticking each off a finger. What exactly gave you the confidence to think I'd trade a Mafia don for you? Delusions of grandeur, or just poor math? He went red, stepped closer with his teeth bared, and stopped dead as the temperature around us dropped 10 degrees. James materialized like weather changing, unhurried, lethal. He didn't even bother looking at Derek twice. His eyes went straight to me, voice edged in frost. Car. Now. I climbed in fast, purely to avoid becoming collateral damage. We're not together, him and me. Nothing happened. James stared straight ahead. Sure. The door slammed with enough force that Nico, in the driver's seat, dropped the wheel entirely. My phone buzzed. A text from Nico, sent under the dashboard where James couldn't see. He's jealous. Do something. I stared at the screen. Mafia bosses get jealous? 6 years at the Bureau had taught me tactical entry, hostage negotiation, and 11 ways to disarm a man twice my size. Nobody had ever taught me how to soothe an offended boyfriend. I did what any modern person does in crisis. I Googled it. Top results. Hug him. Kiss him. Compliment him. I glanced sideways at the storm cloud currently occupying the driver's seat's rearview mirror. Hugging felt like walking into traffic. Kissing felt like signing my own death certificate. That left compliments. I cleared my throat. You're better looking than Derek. James's brow twitched upward very slightly. Richer too, I added. His jaw eased a fraction, murder rescheduled for later. Feeling bold, I went for the kill shot, and you'd definitely win a fight. Also, you'll probably outlive him by decades. There was a beat of silence. Nico made a strangled sound up front. James turned his head slowly, dangerously. That's the best you've got? Outliving him? I panicked. It's a compliment where I come from. He studied my confused face for a long second, and then he laughed. Not his usual half-smirk, but a real laugh, eyes crinkling, 10 years of ice cracking off him at once. It was unfortunately the single most attractive thing I had ever witnessed. He reached over and flicked my forehead, gentle. Still want to call off the wedding? I clutched my forehead, dazed. Let me think about it. That weekend, the Coles hosted a birthday gala for Chloe, officially a celebration. actually a stage built to parade her closeness to the Morettis, while grinding me under the heel of public opinion. Chloe had sent over a bargain bin dress for me to wear, expecting me to show up looking like an afterthought. Instead, I walked into the ballroom in a bespoke suit that cost more than her family's mortgage, James's hand steady at the small of my back, and her smile cracked like drywall. Mid-party, she staged her set piece, dragging Derek forward, with tears glistening on command. "Andy, please, forgive Derek. You two loved each other so deeply once. Now that you have James, don't push him to the edge." Derek performed abandonment beautifully. The room murmured, eyes swiveling to me and James. I sighed. "Fine, since you insist on the theatrics." I pulled out my phone, synced it to the room's speakers, and hit play. Derek's own recorded voice rang out, oily and self-satisfied. "Relax, babe, Andy's a fool. Soon as I get the coal investment locked, I'm done with him. Then it's just you and me out in the open." The ballroom went dead silent. Derek's face drained of color. Chloe stammered, fake tears evaporating on the spot. I sipped my champagne, unbothered. "Don't cry. You lost the money. I lost the fool. And Derek lost you behind my back. Why are you the one performing grief?" James stepped in from behind, draping his jacket over my shoulders, gaze sweeping the room like a blade. "My fiancé," he said, voice low but carrying to every corner, "doesn't answer to strangers' opinions." After that night, I noticed James watching me differently, thoughtful, assessing. The calm in the warehouse, the precision against Chloe, the composure at the party. None of it matched the boy he thought he knew. A man like him didn't miss patterns. He was starting to investigate, so I doubled down on the act, flinching at horror movies, yelping at shadows, cowering theatrically in corners. James watched, said nothing, and waited. The test came on a stormy night when the power failed across the estate. Rain hammered the windows in sheets, thunder rattling the old glass in its frames, and I was creeping barefoot toward the kitchen for a midnight snack, guided only by the intermittent flash of lightning, when a shadow dropped silently through the window, too silent, too precise, too economical in its movement to be anything but a professional. I caught the smell of him before I saw him clearly. Gun oil, wet nylon, the particular adrenaline suite of a man being paid to hurt someone. My body reacted before my fear could catch up. He lunged with a blade, silver flashing in the next strobe of lightning. I sidestepped on instinct alone, caught his wrist, twisted until I felt the tendon strain, and drove a heel into his ribs with a crack that seemed too loud for the storm to swallow. He hit the wall and slid down the wallpaper, coughing blood onto the hardwood, just as the backup generator kicked in with a groan, and the lights blazed back to life all at once, catching me mid-motion like a photograph nobody was supposed to take. I was still mid-stance, one leg raised, when I turned and found James on the staircase, arms crossed, watching me with an expression that had stopped pretending not to know things. I panicked and kicked wildly. I dropped my leg fast, hand flying to my chest. The intruder groaned from the floor. "You kicked wildly and hit my exact pressure point?" James descended the stairs slowly, voice light with real danger underneath. "Andy, how long do you plan to keep performing?" I closed my eyes. This is it. Either he kills the witness and buries the body, or I'm too pretty to throw away. He waved a hand. Nico hauled the assassin off for questioning. When we were alone, James sat unbothered, legs crossed. "Who taught you this?" "Learned it in a dream," I said, straight-faced. He didn't believe a syllable and didn't push. Instead, he tapped the table once. "I don't need to know who you are or what you want. Here's the deal. Stay, play your part well, and I protect you from whoever's hunting you, and if I still want to leave, I'll break your legs and lock you in." Said so casually it barely registered as a threat. I lifted my chin. "What if I beat you first?" His mouth curved, dangerous and warm at once. "You too?" I swallowed hard. A Mafia don running a honey trap. Unfair advantage. I agreed to the deal. Life as a kept fiancé began in earnest. Sleep till noon, private chef for grocery runs, movie knives, no blood, no running. I decided, somewhere between a lion and a lobster dinner, that being a spoiled rich fiancé beat federal law enforcement by a wide margin. A few nights after we struck our new arrangement, another storm rolled in off the lake fast enough to catch the estate's gardeners mid-shift, and I found myself on the second-floor balcony watching lightning fork over the water, the wind cold and briny against my face. I hadn't heard James come up behind me until his coat settled over my shoulders, unbidden, the way it seemed to do more and more often lately. "You'll catch a cold," he said, close enough that I felt the words more than heard them. I like storms. It was true, in a way I couldn't fully explain to him yet. Something about the noise and the danger of it reminded me of a life I used to know how to survive, back when survival was the only skill I had. They're honest. No pretending to be calm. He didn't answer right away. When I glanced over, he was watching me instead of the sky, an expression on his face I hadn't learned to read yet. Something careful, something almost afraid of itself. "Can I ask you something?" he said, "and you don't deflect for once?" My chest tightened. Depends on the question. You know I've stopped needing an explanation for what you can do. Not a question, not quite an accusation either, just a fact laid gently on the table between us. So why do you still talk like you're halfway out the door? I could have deflected. I'd deflected everything else for weeks. But something about the rain and the dark and the warmth of his coat, still holding his own heat, made the old excuses feel suddenly exhausting to keep carrying. "Because everyone I've ever let myself need has ended up a liability," I said quietly. "Mine or theirs. I don't know how to want something without planning the exit first." James was quiet for a long moment, rain drumming steadily against the balcony roof above us. Then, carefully, like he was diffusing something instead of just talking, he reached out and tucked a piece of damp hair back from my forehead. "Then don't plan one," he said. "I'm not asking you to trust the world. I'm asking you to trust that I'm not going anywhere." His mouth curved, faint and real. "I've buried men for less loyalty than I've already given you for free." The wind picked up, cold and sharp with the smell of rain on hot pavement, and for a moment, one unguarded, suspended moment, I thought he might close the last foot of distance between us entirely. His eyes dropped to my mouth, just once, just barely, and my pulse did something humiliatingly undisciplined. Then thunder cracked directly overhead, loud enough to rattle the balcony doors, and the moment scattered like startled birds. I laughed instead, mostly to cover the fact that my hands weren't quite steady, and he let me, though the look he gave me afterward promised the conversation wasn't finished. Only postponed. "Go inside," he said finally, voice rough, "before you actually do catch that cold." I went, but I noticed, climbing back through the balcony doors, that he stayed out there another minute himself, coatless in the rain, like a man needing the cold to talk some sense back into himself. To avoid raising more suspicion with a sudden personality shift, I returned to Lakeside Preparatory Academy, the private school where old money families sent their heirs, and where the real Andy had spent years as everyone's favorite punching bag, thanks in no small part to Chloe's circle of friends, who played supportive sister in public and orchestrated cruelty in private. The building smelled like it always had, floor polish and old money, boys in navy blazers clustering by lockers that cost more to install than most people's cars. It hadn't changed. I had. First day back, the classroom fell silent the moment I walked in. I strolled to my usual desk, and my nose caught superglue before my eyes did. Chloe's lackey at the next desk was biting back giggles, waiting for the show. I straightened, lifted her chair instead, swapped it calmly for my glued one, and sat her down before she'd finished processing. "Hey, are you insane? Give me my chair back." I didn't bother answering, just held her down with one hand. "Sit." My voice came out flat, edged with something that had once made hardened men flinch. She froze, and by the time she realized her own chair had claimed her, it was too late for dignity. The class erupted in laughter. After school, one of Chloe's larger friends blocked the hallway, cracking his knuckles for effect. "Getting cocky, aren't you, Cole?" I looked him over, unhurried, jaws sitting crooked, weights on the wrong foot. "Recent fight you lost? Want me to reset that alignment? Free of charge." He went pale, backed into a locker, and gave up the confrontation entirely. The following week, the Morettis convened a shareholder meeting with the family's senior capos. James brought me along, sat me in the chair beside his own. Most of the old guard resented it, convinced he'd gone soft over some useless Cole heir. Uncle Vincent, who'd wanted the family throne since before James could walk, slapped a file onto the table. Vincent Moretti, 54. James's uncle, long convinced the family belongs to him, smiles with his mouth, his eyes never join in. James. The shipment out of the East Yard got seized by customs. 30 million gone. Too busy playing house with the coal boy to run this family? The room tensed, a dozen older men in expensive suits shifting almost imperceptibly, the air thick with the particular anticipation of people waiting to see a leader stumble. James flicked his lighter open and shut, unhurried, saying nothing. though I noticed the muscle ticking once along his jaw. I glanced at the shipping route glowing on the projector screen, then at the timestamps stamped along the bottom corner, and something in the pattern snagged at me the way a loose thread snags at a sleeve. I couldn't help it. That wasn't bad luck, I said, standing, tracing the route with a laser pointer under a dozen alarmed stares. The ship detoured around the island here, 3 hours off schedule, no reason given, and the dock supervisor happened to take leave that exact day. His wife's due date, apparently. Convenient. Dead silence. There's a leak in this family, I continued, calm. Someone fed the route and timing straight to customs. Check the supervisor's bank records and his calls from the last 3 days. That's where it starts. Vincent went white. The supervisor answered to him. An old capo studied me like I'd grown a second head. Where does a kid learn to read a shipping manifest like that? I shrugged, clicking off the pointer. Crime procedurals. 8 p.m. reruns. You all really don't watch TV. Nico pouring water nearby. Nearly choked. James snapped his lighter shut, mouth curling, with open, unguarded pride. By the next morning, word had rewritten itself across the family. James's fiancé wasn't a pretty decoration. He had teeth. Chloe, watching her family's fortunes crumble and her own reputation curdle, went reckless. She reached out secretly to a rival syndicate, offering my schedule in exchange for having me grabbed as leverage against James. She never suspected Nico had been monitoring her phone since the tea incident. We turned her own trap against her, letting her overhear a fake plan. Tomorrow, 3 p.m., alone at the Cat Cafe on Hoyne Avenue, reading. The rival crew staked out the cafe for 2 hours past the appointed time. When the door finally opened, they bagged the figure who walked out and dragged him into an alley. Inside the bag, not a trembling fiancé, but Nico sipping a boba tea, utterly unbothered. Afternoon, gentlemen. Before they could draw a weapon, James and I stepped out from either end of the alley, Moretti muscle sealing every exit behind us. Delivery service excuse, I asked pleasantly. Funny, I was just about to come find you myself. Back at the Cole house, Chloe sat preening in her prettiest dress, waiting for news of my disappearance. Her phone buzzed. She opened it, expecting photos of my ruin. Instead, a picture of a dozen unconscious men laid out in a neat row, spelling an unflattering word, captioned from an unknown number. Next time, hire smarter help. Love, your favorite sister. She threw the phone hard enough to crack the screen. After that string of failures, James seemed to grasp a simple truth. If he kept his affection wrapped in cold silence, I'd eventually start treating him like a landlord instead of a man courting me. A Mafia don, it turned out, understood war rooms far better than romance. He called Nico in for a strategy session. Nico's advice, distilled from a late-night internet search. Compliment him, give him gifts, make him feel safe. James executed the plan with the precision of a man storming a compound. Day 1. Compliments. At dinner, he looked at me, forced his face into an expression that resembled a smile the way a wolf resembles a golden retriever, and said, You didn't break anyone's leg today. You even ate properly. Good behavior. I nearly choked on my rice. Day 2. Gifts. I woke to find a stack of documents on my dresser, deeds to 2 properties, transfer papers for storefronts downtown, keys to a limited edition sports car. I carried the whole stack downstairs in silence. You call this a small gift? He frowned. You don't like it? I'm deciding whether to celebrate or call an accountant before the IRS finds me first. Day 3, making me feel safe. I asked to run to the store for a few things. The moment I stepped outside, 10 bodyguards in black suits and sunglasses fell into formation behind me, earpieces buzzing. I turned left, 10 men turned left. The whole store stared at me like I'd wandered in from another planet. I called James, seething. Are you turning me into a video game boss? I can't buy toothpaste without a security detail. His courtship campaign collapsed spectacularly. Eventually, Nana Rosa had enough, hauling him into the study for a proper scolding. You're courting a person, not acquiring a company. Just tell him you like him. Is your mouth just for eating? James spent the whole night brooding. For a man who could walk into an ambush unarmed, saying, I like you apparently ranked among his hardest missions. That evening I was sprawled on the couch, apple in hand, half watching a comedy, when he came down the stairs in a black shirt, sleeves rolled, top buttons undone, dangerously handsome and unusually serious. He stopped in front of me, straight-backed like he was standing for inspection. I blinked up at him. Did we get robbed? He took a breath, hands in his pockets, using the same low, commanding voice he reserved for giving kill orders. Andy Cole, I'm giving you one opportunity. To survive breaking one of your men's arms? No. His gaze locked onto mine, unflinching. The opportunity to like me. I nearly choked on the apple. From the hallway, Nico visibly face-palmed, and somewhere behind the curtain, Nana Rosa was clearly listening with a rolling pin at the ready. Later that night, alone in his study, James sat with a faded photograph in his hands, a scrawny boy, covered in bruises, gripping the hand of a smaller child with wide, serious eyes. The photo's edges had gone soft and furred from years of handling, the colors leached to sepia, but James's thumb still knew exactly where to rest without looking, worn into the paper like a habit. It was a memory he'd never shared with a soul, not even Nico, not even the grandmother who'd raised him after his father died. At 10 years old, during a bloody war for control of the Moretti family, James had been kidnapped and locked in a basement for 3 days without food. He remembered the cold of the concrete floor more clearly than he remembered his own mother's face by then, the way hunger stopped feeling like hunger and started feeling like a held breath that wouldn't let go. A neighborhood kid from the block over, thin, quiet, fierce, dressed in a coat 2 sizes too big, had found the window by accident, smashed it with a rock, and started sneaking him half a sandwich and water bottles every night, small hands passing food through a gap barely wide enough for a wrist, before finally causing a distraction loud enough to let him escape. That child had been Andy Cole, but years later, when the Moretti family tracked Andy down to repay the debt and sealed the engagement, a near-fatal illness had wiped the memory clean from his mind. He grew into someone timid, someone who flinched and looked away whenever James entered a room. James, mistaking the avoidance for disgust, answered coldness with coldness, and the years piled up between them like snow nobody bothered to shovel. Lately, though, everything about Andy had changed. The fear gone, the softness replaced with something sharp and sure and lazily unbothered. And the strangest part was that James didn't feel repulsed. He felt pulled, helplessly, toward every new version of him. He traced a finger over the old photograph once more before locking it back in the drawer, glancing out the window toward the light, still glowing in Andy's room. "Whoever you are now," he murmured to the empty study, "I'm not letting anyone take you from me again." That weekend, my father summoned me back to the Cole house. The second I walked through the door, a glass tumbler sailed past my head and shattered against the wall. "Ungrateful brat," Robert Cole roared from his armchair, making a scene at Chloe's party. "Do you know how much face this family lost?" My stepmother dabbed at dry eyes beside him. "Andy, honey, I know you're upset with your sister, but she's young. How could you humiliate your own family like that? We raised you, married you off well. The least you could do is show some gratitude instead of tearing this house down." Chloe hovered behind her, playing wounded innocent to the hilt. I laughed outright. A truly award-worthy family. The moment James seemed done with me, you'd have thrown me under the bus to elevate her. Now that I'm still standing, suddenly you want me to hand over favors for the Coles. I tossed a folder onto the coffee table without ceremony. "Before the guilt trip continues, explain why the dividend payments from my late mother's shares have been quietly wired into your brother's overseas account for the past 10 years. My stepmother's face went bloodless. My father snatched the folder, color shifting through several shades of fury, but rather than turn on his wife, he rounded on me instead. "You come home just to start trouble? This family's money is mine to manage. You think because James Moretti backs you now, you get to walk in here and lecture me?" He swung his hand toward my face, full force. I was already calculating which joint to break when a hand closed around his wrist from behind, mid-air, grip like a vice. My father's face twisted in pain. James stood behind me, eyes cold as the bottom of Lake Michigan in January, and the room's temperature seemed to drop with him. He flung Robert's hand away, wiped his own fingers with a handkerchief, and dropped it to the floor like discarded trash. "You put your hand on what's mine." His voice was quiet. Quiet was worse. Interesting choice. He pulled me close against his chest, gaze sweeping the frozen room. "Moretti Holdings will be reviewing every line of credit this family has with us, starting Monday. Robert, I'd start being very careful who I raise a hand to." He walked me out, hand locked around mine, without a backward glance. Derek, watching from the sidelines as I climbed effortlessly into a life he'd never touch, couldn't accept it either. He started whispering to anyone who'd listen that I'd only married James under duress while still loving him desperately. The low point came in a deeply suggestive text. Andy, I dreamed about you last night. You're not happy with him, are you? Your heart still belongs to me. I screenshotted the nauseating message and forwarded it straight to James. 30 seconds later, my phone rang. Why send that to me? He said, voice frost-edged. Enemy intelligence report, I said around a mouthful of chips. Enemy? Obviously. He's actively sabotaging our internal unity. Needs to be neutralized before it spreads. A pause. I swear I heard the smallest huff of laughter down the line before his voice snapped back to business as usual. Glad you've finally seen sense. The next day, of all rotten luck, we ran straight into Derek at an art gallery downtown. He puffed up despite clearly recognizing the danger standing beside me. James. Andy used to be crazy about me. He'd have done anything for me back then. I stepped forward before James's temper caught fire, nodding thoughtfully. True. My eyesight used to be terrible. Derek froze. I tucked my arm through James's. Good news, though. It's been corrected. Cataract surgery, I added, deadpan. Vision's 20/20 now. Turns out James looks about 1,000 times better than you ever did. Derek went puce and stormed off without a word. I turned, expecting a compliment for my flawless comeback. Instead, James was staring at me, eyes dark and unreadable. Your eyesight really is fixed. Genuinely, I said. You see me clearly then. Very clearly. Extremely handsome, if you're asking. He turned his head away and cleared his throat twice. From behind us, Nico, who missed absolutely nothing, clocked the tips of the notorious January Dawn's ears, flushing a deep, undeniable red. The Moretti family's growing power made enemies faster than allies. One faction decided James's recent leniency toward me marked a fatal weak point. Walking home from the bakery one evening, I clocked 5 tails within a block, heavy-footed, obvious, thoroughly unprofessional. I turned deliberately down an empty side street, intending to handle it fast and get home before the cake went cold. 5 men blocked both ends of the alley, brandishing bats with ugly grins. Miss Cole, sorry, Mr. Cole. Come with us nice and quiet, and nobody gets hurt. I set the cake box carefully on a trash can lid and rolled my wrists. I'm actually in a hurry to get home for dinner. 5 minutes later, tires screeched at the mouth of the alley. James burst in, breathing hard, security detail bristling behind him, and stopped cold at the sight waiting for him. 5 grown men, hog-tied and stacked against the wall like firewood, groaning into the pavement. Me, dusting off my hands, gently lifting the cake box back up. Who sent you? I nudged the ringleader's shin with my shoe. Talk fast, my hot pot's getting cold. West Side crew, the man sobbed. Please, we're sorry. I turned and met James's complicated stare. Ahem. Small world. I was just passing through. Passing through, James repeated slowly, surveying the pile of unconscious men. Straight through an entire crew. If I told you I once took a self-defense class, I said all innocence, would you believe me? He crossed the distance, brushed dust off my shoulder with careful fingers. I'd believe you took it a little too seriously. James's investigation eventually surfaced everything at once. The original kidnapping, Chloe's contact with the rival syndicate, Derek's arrogant overreach, all of it traced back to a single hand pulling strings from the shadows. Uncle Vincent, who'd craved the family throne for decades and used both Chloe and Derek to drive a wedge between me and James, hoping to prove to the old guard that James had gone soft over a Cole nobody and no longer deserved to lead. Knowing the shape of the trap, James and I decided to spring it ourselves. We staged a spectacular public breakup. In the middle of the Moretti estate's main hall, in front of every staff member and every one of Vincent's planted spies, I hurled a couch cushion at James's head and screamed loud enough to wake the neighbors. You never respected me. I'm done, James. I'm going back to the Coles. James caught the cushion, arranged his face into something appropriately cruel. Leave then. Don't bother coming back. I stormed out with a suitcase pre-packed full of snacks, storming past the gates in full view of the staff. Word that James Moretti and his fiancé had split, publicly and permanently, tore through Chicago's underworld by dinner time. Vincent celebrated with champagne, certain his moment had arrived. Chloe booked a same-day spa appointment, already dreaming of the day she'd take my place. While they toasted their imaginary victory, I locked my bedroom door at the Cole house and texted James. So, was I convincing? His reply came instantly. Very convincing. I didn't enjoy hearing you say you don't like me, though. I laughed under my breath, thumbs flying. It was acting. You're a bad actor, then. I didn't buy a word of it. The Cole house felt smaller than I remembered, all narrow hallways, and the particular hush of a household holding its breath, waiting to see which way the wind would blow. I spent the days performing heartbreak with the same precision I once reserved for surveillance. Red-rimmed eyes at breakfast, listless silence at dinner, the occasional untouched plate pushed away like grief had stolen my appetite. Chloe ate it up like dessert. Publicly, James and I were locked in an icy standoff, refusing to acknowledge each other's existence. Privately, near midnight, I heard a soft knock against my second-floor balcony window. I peeked through the curtain to find a very large, very familiar silhouette crouched on the ledge, holding a steaming takeout bag like it was the most normal thing in the world. I yanked the window open and hauled him inside by the collar. "James, are you insane? This is the second floor. Since when does a Mafia don climb up balconies like some lovesick teenager sneaking past curfew?" He set the bag down calmly, unbothered, already unpacking containers. Cameras on the front gate and side door. Walls have ears in this house. The balcony's the only blind spot. You could have broken your neck. He glanced up, eyes bright in the dark, mouth curved with something reckless and warm. "For a chance to see you, a little risk hardly registers." Heat crawled up my face before I could stop it. Damn this man. Weeks ago, he could barely string together a sincere sentence. Now every word out of his mouth landed like it had been aimed. I bent over the food to hide my expression, and he simply sat across from me, chin propped on one hand, occasionally reaching over to wipe a smear of sauce from the corner of my mouth. If anyone in Chicago's underworld had seen the January dawn behaving like this, they'd have gouged their own eyes out in disbelief. Over the following days, believing me thoroughly disgraced, Chloe made a habit of visiting to gloat and provoke. I played along beautifully, wounded, weepy, defeated, and she grew so drunk on triumph that her guard dropped completely. The trap sprang shut. That weekend, Nico delivered a recording straight to my phone. Chloe's voice, syrupy with flattery, addressing Vincent directly. "Don't worry, Uncle Vincent. Andy's a dog without a home now. At the reconciliation dinner this weekend, I'll follow the plan exactly. He'll be ruined for good and out of the Moretti family forever." I listened to the whole thing, then stretched until my joints popped. The curtain was falling. Time to close the net. That weekend, Uncle Vincent threw a lavish family reconciliation dinner at a downtown hotel ballroom, chandeliers blazing, string quartet tuning in the corner, officially meant to smooth over recent tensions within the family. In reality, it was a stage built to bury me for good, dressed up in white tablecloths and good lighting so no one would notice the knife until it was already in. I arrived in a bold red suit, coat draped loosely over my shoulders, and walked into the ballroom like I owned the floor, heels striking the marble in a rhythm too steady to belong to anyone afraid. Chloe stood near Vincent in virginal white, playing the gentle, wounded soul the old Andy used to be. The moment she spotted me, she rushed over, eyes glistening on cue. "You've gotten so harsh lately, Andy. You're really not suited for James anymore. Let him go. I only want him to be happy." The room buzzed, eyes flicking my way, equal parts pity and mockery. I stripped off my gloves slowly and clapped once, twice. "God, you're just a saint, aren't you? Selfless enough to give up your own happiness for your sister's fiancé. Have you considered a career in charity instead of stealing other people's men?" Her face cracked. Before she could summon another tear, I pulled up my phone and cast the recording straight onto the ballroom's main screen. Her syrupy voice and Vincent's oily instructions, laid bare for the whole room to hear. The Cole family's faces drained white. Vincent went ashen, then furious. "Cut it off! Andy, how dare you fabricate this?" The main doors burst open. James strode in with his security detail, presence flattening the entire room, and crossed straight to my side, gripping my hand like a declaration. "So tell me, Uncle, who gave you the right to spread rumors that I'm replacing my fiancé?" The dinner dissolved into chaos. Derek, dragged forward as a witness, folded the moment he saw James's face and threw Chloe under the bus without hesitation. She turned on him just as fast, and the two of them descended into a screaming match that emptied out every last shred of dignity between them. I pulled out a chair and sat, calmly forking a piece of cake. James leaned down. "Good? Cake's excellent," I said. "Drama's even better." Seeing his position collapsing in real time, Vincent went for broke, signaling his loyal muscle to grab me as a hostage. One of them lunged, reaching for my shoulder. I set my fork down, pivoted, and drove a spinning kick square into his chest. He flew back nearly 10 feet, crashing through the dessert table in a spray of frosting and glass. The entire room stopped breathing. I smoothed the front of my suit, sorry reflex. James stepped up behind me, voice carrying easily over the silence. My fiancé startles easily. I'd advise against frightening him further. Every eye in the room went to the bodyguard bleeding into the wreckage of the cake table, and every mind in the room arrived, silently, at the same conclusion. Who, exactly, is the one who should be afraid here? By that night, Vincent was in federal custody, alongside a mountain of embezzlement evidence James's people had been quietly building for months. True to his word, James's promised credit review had already been sitting on Robert Cole's desk for weeks, and with the family's reputation now in ruins alongside its finances, no bank in Chicago would touch a fresh loan. Robert Cole disowned Chloe on the spot, throwing her out of the house in front of half of Chicago society. Less out of principle, most people agreed, than because he could no longer afford the appearance of loyalty. Derek's name became a punchline in every circle that mattered. Back at the estate, I sat on the couch letting James clumsily dab antiseptic on a shallow scratch from the fight. He was quiet for a long time. I know, he said finally, that I saw a side of you today I wasn't supposed to see. I pulled my hand back gently, took a slow breath. James, I'm not the Andy Cole you used to know. I lived a different life, once. No family in it, no days off. Just casework, and men who wanted me dead for getting too close to the truth. Violence was the only skill that kept me breathing. I braced for disgust, for suspicion, for the careful distance men like him kept from things they didn't understand. Instead, he set the antiseptic down and pulled me into his arms, tight enough that I felt his heartbeat against my cheek. Are you afraid of me now? I asked, stunned. Terrified, he murmured, voice rough with something rare and unguarded. Terrified you'll disappear again. Terrified of how much that world must have hurt you. He pressed his lips briefly to my hair. You're past. I won't force out of you. I'm already in it. No negotiation. For the first time since crossing into this life, I wrapped my arms around him and let myself cry into his shirt, and didn't feel weak for it at all. After the dust settled, we finally moved into something that looked unmistakably like a relationship. Two people who were absolute forces of nature in their own worlds and complete disasters at romance, made for a strange, lopsided sort of courtship. James rented out an entire 5-star French restaurant for our first proper date, then stationed 30 bodyguards around the perimeter with their arms crossed, turning candlelit dinner into something that looked more like a gang meeting before a hit. He sent flowers, not a bouquet, but 10 delivery trucks unloading 9,999 roses across the estate's front lawn, until I genuinely wondered if he was opening a flower market. I tried to reciprocate. After racking my brain, I had a custom Damascus steel survival knife commissioned as a gift for his protection. James accepted it with total solemnity and locked it in his most secure safe like a sacred relic. Nico watched the whole exchange and sighed. Normal couples go to the movies and split popcorn. You two are basically running a joint criminal enterprise disguised as a relationship. One night, a ghost from my old life resurfaced. Victor Wren, a former bureau partner who'd sold me out years ago and vanished before internal affairs could close in, had somehow found his way into this world too, and set his sights directly on James. Victor Wren, late 30s. My former partner, once trusted completely, until he traded me for a payout and left me to clean up the wreckage of his betrayal alone, sharp, cold, and allergic to loose ends. He sent a single text with coordinates to an abandoned pier along the river, along with a photo of James's car wired with explosives. Victor wanted me back in the dark. The pier smelled of diesel and dead fish, rusted shipping containers stacked like a maze under a sky the color of a healing bruise. He stood waiting in the cold wind when I arrived, hands in his pockets, sneering like the years hadn't changed a thing about either of us. The Bureau's best, falling for someone? A person who's put as many men in the ground as you have. Did you really think you'd earned a normal life? Come with me, or he dies. Something in me that had been simmering quietly for weeks finally boiled over completely. I used to take down men like him because it was the job. Tonight, I was fighting for the man I loved. You're wrong about one thing, Victor. I pulled a knife from my boot, eyes gone flat and cold. It's because of him that I finally want to be a real person again. Victor had planned for a lone operative. He'd forgotten who that operative belonged to now. James was never in danger. He'd already disarmed the explosive hours earlier. He stepped out from behind a shipping container, eyes glinting dangerous in the dark, and we moved together without needing a single word between us. I closed the distance fast, hand to hand, cutting off every escape route, while James's men sealed the perimeter from a distance. 15 minutes later, Victor lay on the ground with both arms broken, pinned under Moretti muscle. Nico, directing cleanup from the sidelines, muttered under his breath, "Normal couples go on vacation together. You two go hunting international fugitives together. I've genuinely caught a cold from all this." As Victor was dragged away, he shot me one last venomous glare. "You've changed," I shrugged, "because I have a home now." James crossed the distance, shrugged his coat over my shoulders to cover the dust and grime, and pulled me into his arms, pressing a kiss to my forehead. "Let's go home, love." When James decided it was finally time to propose, he made the mistake of consulting his men for ideas. One suggested renting a helicopter to scatter rose petals across downtown Chicago. Nana Rosa nearly threw her cane at him. "Environmental disaster, you idiot." Another suggested lining up 500 soldiers in formation to shout their blessing in unison. The men cheered instant, "Do it, boss. He'll say yes for sure," while Nana Rosa nearly fainted on the spot. In the end, James scrapped every plan his people offered and drove me himself to an abandoned lot on the city's old industrial edge. Past chain-link fences gone orange with rust and windows boarded over so long the plywood had started to rot, stopping in front of a weathered basement door I didn't recognize. The night was cold enough to fog our breath, the only light a single sodium street lamp buzzing weakly overhead. And something about the quiet of the place felt reverent, like we'd wandered into a church nobody attended anymore. He took my hand, his grip careful, almost hesitant, nothing like the man who once threatened to break my legs without changing his tone, and told me, for the first time, the story of the boy who'd once shared half a sandwich with a stranger and saved his life. His voice, usually so measured, kept catching on the details, like the memory still had teeth. Something in my chest went soft and unsteady. "So who is it you actually love? That kid from years ago, or the person standing in front of you now?" James looked at me for a long moment, voice low and warm. "That kid was the light that made me want to keep living. The person in front of me now is the reason I want to live well for the rest of my life." He dropped to one knee on the gravel, pulled out a ring that caught what little light the street lamp offered, and said none of the grand promises I half expected. "Andy Cole, stay with me." I laughed, tears slipping free before I noticed them starting. "This time," I said, "I'm not running." The wedding shook both sides of Chicago's underworld and its respectable society equally. A ballroom full of made men in tailored suits and old money families in pearls, all pretending not to stare at each other across the aisle. String lights strung overhead like the whole room had been dipped in gold. When the MC asked why I'd chosen to love a man like James Moretti, I took the microphone and answered without hesitation. Rich, handsome, dangerous in a fight, and embarrassingly easy to fluster. The whole room dissolved into laughter. James stood beside me, dragging a hand through my hair, trying and failing to look unbothered while pride shone plainly in his eyes. When it was his turn, he took the microphone, expression deadly serious, and addressed the entire room. "My fiancé is extremely timid and easily frightened. I'd appreciate it if everyone looked out for him going forward. Please don't bully him." The room went absolutely silent. Every soldier who'd ever watched me shatter a man's ribs in one clean strike stared at the floor, sweating quietly. Nico murmured under his breath, "Right." So timid that enemies book flights out of the country the second they hear his name. James ignored every reaction in the room, leaned down, and kissed me deeply while the whole hall erupted into applause. I closed my eyes and thought, quietly, that surviving was never really the finish line. Being loved, that was the ending worth all of it. After the wedding, I became something of a legend inside the Moretti family. Where the men had once feared James, they came to fear me twice as much, because I never had to raise my voice. When a manager was caught skimming from the books, James barely had time to get angry before I set down my tea and asked, mild as ever, "Want to confess with your own fingers, or should I help dislocate a few for you?" The man broke down and confessed everything on the spot. James sat back, smug. "My husband's good," Nico sighed. "Good enough he's about to steal your whole job." I gradually pushed James to wind down the family's gray market operations entirely, folding Moretti Holdings into legitimate business. When he questioned it, I just looked at him. I don't want our kid coming home from school one day, getting asked what daddy does for work, and you having to explain collections with a straight face. James went quiet for half a day at the words our kid. The next morning, he called an emergency meeting and announced, publicly, that the Moretti family was retiring from its old life for good, effective immediately. Word got around fast that James Moretti, the January Dawn himself, had turned into a man who did whatever his husband told him. At a business dinner, a rival dared to tease him about it. Heard your husband says one thing, and you don't dare say two, James. James answered, perfectly at ease. Wrong. He says one thing, and I don't need to say anything at all. When someone later asked if it embarrassed him, losing face in front of the underworld like that, James wrapped his arms around me from behind, face pressed into my neck, voice lazy and warm. Fearing my husband takes real strength. I'm only ever weak for you. Outside, the garden roses were in full bloom, sweet in the evening air. I leaned my head against his chest and listened to the steady beat of his heart. Once, I'd been an agent with a badge number instead of a life. No way back to the world I'd left behind. Now I was Andy Moretti, a wandering soul who'd finally found the harbor he was never supposed to reach. Married life, it turns out, does not come with an instruction manual. Especially not for two people who spent their formative years learning combat instead of communication. Take Tuesday mornings. James insists on making breakfast himself once a week, a gesture so sweet on paper that I nearly cried the first time he announced it. In practice, it means I wake up to the smoke detector shrieking and James standing over a smoking pan, holding a spatula like it personally betrayed him. The recipe said medium heat, he informed me gravely, as if defending himself before a tribunal. James, that's a blowtorch setting. It cooked faster this way. It cooked black. He looked genuinely wounded, so I ate the charcoal pancakes anyway and privately texted Nico to order actual breakfast for delivery in 20 minutes. Nico's reply came instantly. Already ordered. Saw this coming Sunday night. Then there was the great grocery incident. I'd finally negotiated James's security detail for public outings down from 10 ven to exactly 0, on the condition that he come with me personally instead. He agreed, on the further condition that he got to push the cart. What followed was a man who once brokered million-dollar deals without blinking, standing paralyzed in the cereal aisle, staring down 40 nearly identical boxes like they were a hostile negotiation. Which one is the good one? They're all fine, James. Just pick one. You pick. I don't want to choose wrong and disappoint you over breakfast cereal. I laughed so hard I had to lean on the cart. Somewhere behind us, an actual stranger recognized him from the news. James Moretti, of the Moretti family, standing in a supermarket aisle, agonizing over cornflakes versus honey clusters, and had to duck behind a shelf to keep from openly staring. Nana Rosa, for her part, has taken to dropping by unannounced with home-cooked meals for her favorite grandson-in-law, which is to say, an excuse to sit across from me at the kitchen table and interrogate me about wedding photos, honeymoon plans, and, increasingly, when the two of you plan on giving an old woman something to spoil. I've gently and repeatedly explained that we're not having children. We're both plenty busy raising James, frankly, and she's taken to responding by getting an elderly cat instead, naming it Julio Jr., and delivering it to our house every other weekend for bonding time. The cat hates James. It's the single funniest thing I have ever witnessed. A man who once made grown mob capos sweat through their suits gets absolutely wrecked by an elderly tabby who bites him on sight and only purrs for me. It's a strategic animal, James said darkly, nursing a scratch on his hand while I laughed into a couch cushion. It senses weakness. It senses that you smell like cologne and threats, and it doesn't care. I'll have Nico look into rehoming it. You will do no such thing. Your grandmother would end you. He grumbled. But the next weekend, I caught him on the kitchen floor at midnight, quietly offering the cat little pieces of grilled chicken, murmuring bribes in a low, coaxing voice he never uses for anyone but me. When he noticed me watching from the doorway, he froze like a man caught mid-heist. Don't tell Nico. Absolutely telling Nico. There's also the matter of James's terrible, unshakable habit of texting me from inside the same house. I'll be reading in the sunroom, and my phone will buzz with a message from 3 doors down. Come find me. Not urgent. Not important. Just a grown man, feared across 2 states, too proud to simply raise his voice and call my name, sending a text instead like a teenager passing notes in study hall. I've stopped answering them. I just walk toward wherever he is until I find him, and every single time, he looks up like he's surprised and pleased in equal measure, like the entire point was never the message at all, just the fact that I'd come. Nico, for his part, has taken to referring to himself as emotional support staff rather than right hand, on the grounds that 90% of his job now consists of translating James's feelings into sentences a normal person could understand, and the other 10% involves hiding good silverware from the cat. Some nights we don't do anything remarkable at all, just the two of us on the couch, my legs thrown over his lap, a bad movie playing to no one, his fingers tracing slow, absent patterns against my ankle while he reads over shipping contracts he no longer technically needs to read, because old habits, apparently, die harder than old rivals. I watch the lamplight catch the sharp line of his jaw, softened now in a way it never was in that first photograph on his desk, and I think about how strange it is that the safest place I've ever stood is beside the most dangerous man in Chicago. "What are you staring at?" he says, without looking up, because he always knows. "Just thinking that you're a lot easier to live with than a stakeout. High bar. You'd be surprised." He finally glances over, that same crooked, unguarded smile from the car ride home all those months ago, and reaches out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear, unhurried, like we have all the time in the world. Which, as it happens, we finally do. Outside, the lake wind rattles softly against the windows, and somewhere down the hall, Julio Jr. knocks something off a shelf with the deliberate malice only a cat can manage. Neither of us moves to check on it. There will be time for that too. There is time now for almost everything. And for once in either of our strange, blood-soaked, unlikely lives, neither of us is in any hurry at all. If this story pulled at something in you, don't scroll past it quietly. Tell us in the comments which moment made your chest tighten. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so the next story reaches you the moment it drops. Thank you for staying until the very end. It means more than you know.